Killer Innovations Podcast for Wednesday, November 23rd, 2005, show number 37, coming to you from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Killer Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Please keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. Well, I'm in Washington, D.C. this week for the Thanksgiving holiday. All of my kids are home from college, so we're planning a nice 5-day weekend starting today, Wednesday, and just spend some family time together. Sorry for the podcast for being late again. It's just been still crazy during the day job, doing 2 jobs while they're still backfilling for the previous role. I'm sure many of the listeners have experienced this. So hopefully here, mid to late December, my previous role will get filled, and I can begin January 1st really focusing on the new job. So thanks for the feedback. Keep the email coming. You can email me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can always leave voicemail on the feedback line at 703-636-4460, or you can Skype me at Phil_McKinney. Also, I want to express my appreciation to all the listeners for the votes for this podcast on Podcast Alley. This month is the largest vote count that the podcast has ever received. And so again, I want to say thanks. It's that encouragement and support in knowing that there's actually our listeners out there listening to this podcast that kind of keep the energy level going here. If you have not voted and you would like to vote, just go to Podcast Alley and you can search for the Killer Innovations, or you can just go to killerinnovations.com, click on the Podcast Alley button, and it'll take you right to the site. And you have an opportunity there to post your comments and to vote for the podcast. I would also encourage the listeners who have not participated in the KI community site to do so, and those of you who may have participated early to go back and visit often. The KI community is an area where like-minded listeners, those of us who are into getting a better understanding of innovation, creativity, product development, commercialization of technologies, and even commercialization of things that are not technology-based, is an area where we can come together, share our experiences, and look for feedback and encouragement, and create a community of support. If you've been a recent visitor out there within the last 24 to 48 hours, you're going to notice that we've set up for moderators in each of the sections of the community site. Chris Woodruff, a longtime listener to the podcast, has volunteered to be one of the first moderators. So Chris is now listed as the moderator for the open innovation and the innovation economy sections of the site. There will more than likely be more than one moderator for each area, depending on the interest level from listeners to volunteer and support. So if you're interested in being a moderator, and a moderator task is basically to encourage participation, comment and participate actively in the conversations, and to actually post and get conversations going around themes that are of particular interest to that community. So if you're interested in being a moderator for a specific section in the podcast, please just drop me an email, explain which section of the community site you would like to moderate, and then just give me a brief description as to why that particular area is of interest to you. For those of you who just want to participate or just learn from the expertise of the listeners of this podcast, feel free to join in on the conversations. It's pretty lively. It's very interesting. Some great perspectives, and we have pretty wide participation from pretty much all over the world. So again, if you've not been to the site, just go to killerinnovations.com and click on the KI community button. With that, let's go ahead and go into segment 1. This week's segment is actually triggered from an audio feedback that I received from a listener, Kevin Williams. Kevin is a fellow podcaster, and he sent me an audio feedback that basically describes a process that he's created that pulls together a number of topics that we've covered here in the Killer Innovations podcast. So what I want you to do is we're going to listen to Kevin's audio feedback, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Kevin's thoughts here and how you might be able to apply them. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
Hey Phil, Kevin Williams here from the Middle Management Lobotomy Podcast at mmlpodcast.libsyn.com. First, thanks again for continuing to do a tremendous podcast. Your information is very valuable to not only me, but colleagues of mine and numerous other folks in our company who have now picked up and joined the ranks of your listeners. I wanted to share with you something that I'm trying to do, and that is to connect the dots. You cover a number of great issues in individual podcasts, but all of them tie together, and I've been trying to pull together a process that would allow our team to become more effective at developing great innovation. The innovations that we've had so far this year have really been more in, to use your example, the build a better mouse pad style. Maybe they added the color or the shape, but they didn't really do a true break from use of a mouse pad. So we're trying to create a roadmap that'll get us there, and I think that I figured out a high-level process that should yield some good results. It includes 5 steps. First, create a future cast for the business. I've asked them to look out 5 years from now and determine what the business landscape will look like. If they're having difficulty creating that vision, one technique that I've used over time, and I learned a number of years ago in a special project I was on, is to create a letter to a friend who's left on a sabbatical to some remote part of the world and is about to return in the year 2011. And you're writing them a letter to update them about all the changes that have taken place in the 5 years that they've been gone. It's a neat visioning exercise and one that I think works really, really well. So I've encouraged them to use a tool similar to that. Second, once they've got their vision built, I've asked them to build marketing materials such as brochures, radio or TV ads, real high-level stuff without a lot of detail that sell their vision of our company solutions in the year 2011. Once they have those marketing materials together, I've asked them to build a fast prototype of those solutions. It could be screenshots of websites, it could be drawings of kiosks, whatever fits the business, but ultimately not limiting themselves to 2005 technology, ask them to focus on the future customer need and projecting an image of what the solution will look like. Fourth, I've asked them to draw a roadmap that traces back from that future vision to where we are now to indicate what changes need to happen and what investments might be required. Finally, I've asked them to devise a rough cost-benefit analysis using that roadmap as a guideline to determine what investments we need to make and why we need to make them to help sell the innovation. Ultimately, I'm trying to build an innovation pipeline that will keep us going for a while in terms of looking at the business from a far different manner. As you can tell, each of these components reflect individual podcasts that you've done in the past, but tie them together into a single process that I think will be effective. I hope you agree, and hope that you can share this information with your other listeners. Lastly, I'd like to ask you to consider doing a show that would help me out tremendously. I'm looking for information on innovation among non-co-located teams. I lead a team of people that are located across the country, and we see each other physically maybe 2 to 3 times a year. So it's not as easy to brainstorm and do some of the other early development activities around innovation. Using exercises like the one I've reflected help, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on other tips and techniques that might be used in a non-co-located environment. Again, Phil, thanks a lot for the podcast. It provides tremendous support, guidance, and leadership, and you certainly are paying it forward. With that, I'd like to conclude, and thanks a lot. Take care.
Well, first off, I just want to express my appreciation to Kevin for the feedback and for the support. Any other listeners, if you have thoughts, feedback, comments, very simply, you can record them as an MP3. If you don't have recording mechanism, then just call the feedback line, 703-636-4460, and it will record your comment, and it actually gets emailed to me as an MP3 file that I can then insert into an upcoming show. But back to Kevin's comments. One is, I think Kevin's done a phenomenal job of structuring a process that satisfies his needs or his desires for his employees, which is, how do I create an innovation pipeline, a continuous generation of ideas. So just to kind of refresh what Kevin talked about, which was, one, you need to create this vision, which is by writing this letter to a friend, coworker, family member, as if they were coming back from being in some remote jungle where they didn't have news, TV, radio, or anything, and as if they were coming back 5 years in the future, so 2011. And in this case, what I have found with these kinds of visioning exercises is try to be specific. You can be fairly generic, but the real value comes from being very specific in the writing of those. Next, Kevin talks about having them build marketing materials. Marketing materials as if it was 2011. Ads, brochures, radio spots, TV commercials. It doesn't have to be very well defined, but at a very high level, taglines, those types of things. Next is to go ahead and build a fast prototype of that vision. So, that could be a mock-up of screens, as Kevin talked about. It actually could be building a very quick physical model. Now remember, when we talk about fast prototypes, we're talking about things that can be created within 5 to 10 business days. Nothing that's going to take 30 or 60 days. This is things that you want to be able to turn around relatively quickly in order to kind of convey the vision. And then next is to build the roadmap. Take that vision that you have in the future and back into the killer or the gates that have to be cleared, or technologies that have to be developed, or in some cases actual killer innovations that have to be built as intermediaries in order to achieve that vision. And then do a cost-benefit analysis for each of those key milestones or key steps. And that the benefit analysis, then cost-benefit analysis, then allows you to then rationalize that this is an achievable process and that management and the organization can see a path to how to get there. And then each one of those key milestones, then you then need to run through the innovation process from the standpoint of defining it, building the proof of concepts, doing the customer trials, and bringing those to market. So in that case, using a well-defined gate milestone process to take each of those items that you identified in the roadmap and feed them into a gate milestone process to make sure that you measure, track, and ensure success for the delivery. Now, what I think is Kevin here has done an excellent job at being very succinct and clear about the process for his organization, and I couldn't have said it better myself. In my own personal experience, one area, and I haven't talked about this in the podcast yet, but about building the marketing materials for the future. Now, I talk about a little bit scattered through a couple of podcasts, but I personally have seen one example where an organization literally wrote a newspaper, formatted, looked like a standard newspaper, whether that be the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. But the date line on this newspaper was, I think, 10 years in the future, or maybe 5 years in the future. And then the articles, and they actually had contracted with journalists to come in and write the articles. So it looked professional, just as if it were a real newspaper that had been produced. In this way, the employees within the organization who had this vision of where the company could be in the future created this newspaper and then distributed this newspaper to the senior executives within the corporation. This turned out to be such a phenomenal success from the standpoint of having the executives understand this vision that was being laid out by a strategy organization within a large corporation as to what could be, that these newspapers are still being produced and still being distributed. And so therefore, it was a very, very clever way to convey this vision for the future. And they did it in a very professional manner. I mean, it was the kind of a traditional paper of a newspaper, the printing, the quality of the writing, but it turned out to be a very, very effective way to communicate to a broad audience with a variety of expertise and backgrounds. And they actually inserted ads in this newspaper, and these ads were ads for the company, products, technology, services, articles about customer feedback, reactions, winning major awards for quality, a whole wide range of things. But it was very, very well done. The thing here with what Kevin also has proposed is not to do it as a one-time activity. If you're going to use this to feed your innovation pipeline, technologies and innovations that you have to develop to achieve that vision, this is not a one-time exercise. You have to do it continuously. You have to be able to get out there and do this repeatedly in order, one, to validate the path, validate the vision, and then two, to be able to make mid-course corrections, and three, to make sure that you're working on the right things at the right time. So my recommendation is that you should repeat this every 6 months, minimally. If you can do it every quarter, that may be a little bit overkill. Once a year, that's too much of a gap. So once every 6 months is kind of a good time frame to be working on this. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to segment number 2. In segment number 2, weak signals. In this week's weak signal, we're going to talk about a new kind of an advertising model that we're seeing emerging in the marketplace. And what we're calling this, and actually it comes from trendwatching.com. If you haven't been to that site, I would encourage you to do that. And I was out there scanning the site over the last couple of weeks, and they had a really interesting trend that they've identified called Tryvertising. And basically what they mean by Tryvertising, and I'm quoting from their site here, is a new breed of product placement in the real world, integrating your goods and services into daily life in a targeted, relevant way so that consumers can make up their minds based on their experience, not your message. So this is a case where you may see products that are out there that you can actually touch, and use. So I've seen them at like NASCAR races where you can actually go and try a new digital camera, try a new cell phone, and you actually can use it for the day. Some interesting applications for this that have been coming up quite interestingly from the marketplace is things like Sony, which has a new range of DVD handycams. And what they did in the London Zoo in June was they actually gave this out to people who were attending the zoo. So you could actually walk around, you could try it out. They gave you a little demonstration on how to basically use it. And then you walked around and was able to use the new DVD camera. And at the end of that, it burned the DVD, you walked home, and you had the DVD in your hands. And so the key here is it wasn't really trying to do a hard sell on the product as it was to get the product into your hands and letting the experience sell you rather than them trying to do it through a traditional kind of advertising model. Some other interesting examples includes Whirlpool, where Whirlpool has actually set up kind of these mini kiosk areas where they actually have washers and dryers and dishwashers and refrigerators. And you can actually bring your laundry in and try the washers and dryers out. See how clean it is, how quiet it is, how easy it is to use the features in it, and really be able to have that real experience before you make that major buy decision for a new given product. Now, this is kind of the what I see as the next step beyond simply the reference selling, which we've talked about in the previous podcast, where we talked about the twinsumer. The twinsumer being where I'm involved in a community of, in my case, maybe it's high-tech executives. And I'm on a bulletin board site and I find somebody else that's on that site that is, has a similar educational background, similar socioeconomic background, similar likes and dislikes. I like certain cars, I like certain sports. And then that person then recommends a new consumer electronics device. Then I'm going to be more inclined to buy that. So twinsumer is what we're kind of seeing today in the marketplace. Tryvertising is kind of the new emerging area where it's beyond just simply the reference. I've gotten the reference, I've come up with a short list of the items that I want to buy. Now the question is how do I go and ensure that I'm not going to have a disappointing experience? And to do that is actually go and use the product. Actually go try it out. And that doesn't try it out by just pushing a few buttons in a 5-minute review of the product on the showroom floor. Bring the laundry in, run a load of dishes in the dishwasher. Try that electronics, new consumer electronics, in a pseudo real life experience. Some of the, I don't know if you want to call it kind of the, minor versions of Tryvertising that you may have seen in the retail store experience would include, for instance, the Bose kiosks. Now I'm a big Bose fan, and I have the Bose noise canceling headphones, and I'm in the process of actually moving to a house in California, so I'm looking to put new consumer electronics into the house. So actually, if anybody from Bose is listening, feel free to donate. Very expensive, technology, so I want to make sure it's the right thing before I buy it. But what Bose now has is if you go, for instance, into Best Buy, you literally can stand there. They have this little kiosk with all of the little Bose speakers, so you can actually get the feeling for what this is going to exactly sound like when it's in your home. You can bring your own CDs in, you can put them in, you can put your own DVDs in, you can play them back, and you can actually get this experience before you actually lay out that kind of money for a new technology. And I mean, I think the Tryvertising is a very compelling kind of new selling model. So if you're looking at launching a new kind of killer innovation, what kind of Tryvertising experience can you create? In the Netherlands, in a Villeroy and Bosch bubble shops, they literally let customers experience all of their products, which include, bubble showers, bubble baths, and literally these things are in like private little suites. They can do something. I'm reading here on the website, but you can basically, what is it like? 6 appointments a day, and these stores are running at 80% occupancy, where literally couples will come in, climb into a bubble bath together, climb into a shower together, and have that experience. Make sure that this is actually what they want to buy, and this is actually something that they would, use in their home. And these are really free, no strings attached tryout sessions for these, to be able to try these products out. And you basically get an hour to be able to use these kind of personalized private rooms where you can actually try these products out. So again, kind of a very interesting model for what's coming down the line as far as new methods of really convincing your customers that what you have is really compelling and worth the premium that a killer innovation demands. With that, we're going to move on to segment number 3, the killer question of the week. And this one's going to be an interesting kind of a question. This one gets very personal, so your initial reaction to this question is going to be a little bit startling, but thinking about these kinds of questions forces you not to look outside for that idea. It may be something literally sitting right in your lap. So, this week's killer question is, what one innovation could make your job obsolete? What one innovation could make your job obsolete? Now, those of you who listened to last week's podcast, you knew that I was giving a speech on Friday back here in Washington, D.C. It was at a local community college. My wife actually volunteered me to give this speech. She actually teaches at one of the local community colleges, and through some connections that she had, I got asked to speak at this lunchtime event. So I did that on Friday. And basically, the topic of the speech was around innovation and creativity. And the basic context of the speech is that we're seeing this movement from the knowledge economy into the creative economy. And what's happening is that as older economies begin to fade out and new economies begin to emerge that are going to be really the growth engines for entire industries and entire countries, and the global economic engine here for us, older economies begin to fade out and begin to become commoditized. And we're seeing that with the outsourcing of the knowledge economy. Just as we saw the outsourcing of the industrial economy. We saw, steel production get exported. We saw low-cost manufacturing going offshore. We've seen that going on for many years. Knowledge economy, we're seeing knowledge workers' jobs being outsourced. So whether that be call centers, whether that be software development, even design activities. We're seeing now where auto manufacturers are outsourcing the design, or I shouldn't say really design, the prototype development for things like axles and fenders and those types of things in the auto industry for next generation cars. So we're seeing this knowledge economy really going offshore. Well, what was the one innovation that's enabling that to happen? I would argue that it was low-cost telecommunications. With low-cost telecommunications, broadband access, and voice communications, you were able to move the information back and forth very long distances. And so therefore, this idea where I have to have all my employees located in one facility, in one place, and be able to walk down an aisle and see all of my employees has quickly evaporated. And once that began to happen, then it didn't matter whether that employee was a mile away from the office or 5,000 miles away from the office. That infrastructure enabled you literally to take advantage of the scales and the economic cost structures in other parts of the world. So the ability to move the information back and forth therefore allowed you to do things like move call centers, move your IT infrastructure, move your software development, a whole variety of technologies. So in this case, if you were to ask yourself, 10 years ago, what one innovation could make your job obsolete, it was really about this low-cost telecommunications. So when you think about this killer question, it may not be obvious. But the key here is if you find that first, if you find that innovation that could potentially replace your job or jobs within your company, then you can avoid being outsourced, meaning you can avoid being on the back end trail of the changes that are coming down. And if you're clever enough, you can find methods that can really take advantage of that shift. So again, this week's killer question is, what one innovation could make your job obsolete? And with that, thanks for listening. I know this is kind of a shorter show than normal, but I'm wrapping this up on late Wednesday night, going into this long holiday here for Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So more than likely, I will not put a podcast out this weekend. I'll put one out a week from Sunday. So I'm actually going to skip 10 days here in between. So thank you for your understanding, and we'll get back on track, not this Sunday, but a week from Sunday. So please send me your audio feedback, your questions, thoughts, and particularly, how do you apply what you've heard? I think the audio feedback from Kevin Williams earlier this show was excellent, and I'd be interested in hearing from more listeners about how they've applied this. If you do this in an audio feedback form, it's easiest then for me to include it and share it with all of the listeners. Also, feel free to share your experiences in the KI community site, so don't forget to visit there. Please remember to vote. Your vote is the easiest way to let your favorite podcast know that you appreciate the effort that they put into the research, producing, publishing, and the cost they incur with all of the hosting and download fees in order to share this podcast with you. So get subscribed, tell others about this podcast, and get others to subscribe. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you here in about a week from Sunday, so it'll be about 10 days from now. And I'll be in Cupertino, California at that time, so that podcast will come from there. And again, thank you, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.